Maya Chen stared at the letter in her hands. She read it 3 times because the words did not make sense. Official seal of the Galactic Integration Office glowed blue at the top of the document. Everything looked correct. Her name was spelled right. Her identification number matched, but the content was impossible. Congratulations on your acceptance to the Vexari Combat Academy, she read aloud to her empty apartment. Your exceptional combat scores have earned you a place among the galaxy's finest warriors. Maya looked down at herself. She was wearing fuzzy slippers and a sweater with a coffee stain on the sleeve. She had never held a weapon in her life. She worked at a desk where she processed immigration forms for aliens visiting Earth. The most dangerous thing she had ever done was argue with a craft diplomat about missing paperwork. She picked up her communicator and called the integration office. Human resources, how may I direct your call? A bored voice answered, yes. Hello, this is Maya Chen from the documentation department. I received a transfer letter, but I think there has been a mistake. One moment. Keys clicked. Chen Maya transferred to Vexari Combat Academy, confirmed and processed, but I applied for the Vexari Clerical Academy, the administrative training program. More clicking. A long pause. Oh, Maya repeated. It seems someone typed VCA instead of VCLA. The system auto assigned you to combat instead of clerical. Maya felt her stomach drop. Can you fix it? The transfer is already processed. You are officially enrolled. Changing it now would require Form 7B, which needs approval from 3 department heads, 2 of whom are on vacation, and the Vexari Admission Council, which only meets once every 6 months, so I should just go to the deadliest military academy in the galaxy because someone made a typing error. You could file an appeal. Processing time is approximately 14 months. Maya hung up. She sat on her couch for a long time. She thought about refusing to go, but refusing a galactic transfer meant losing her job, her apartment, and her immigration status on 3 different planets. She had worked too hard to build her life. Maybe it would not be so bad. Maybe she could explain the situation when she arrived. Surely they would understand that a small human woman with no combat training did not belong at a warrior academy. 2 weeks later, Maya stood on the landing platform of the Vexari Combat Academy and realized she had been very wrong. The academy rose from a jagged mountain like a fortress built by giants. The walls were black stone, carved with images of battle and death. Statues of famous warriors lined the entrance path, each one depicting a different species in a moment of violent victory. The smallest statue was 3 times Maya's height. Round her, new students filed off transport ships. Kree warrior walked past, his gray skin covered in ritual scars, his forearms thick with muscle. He was carrying an axe, taller than Mia's entire body. A group of silicons moved in perfect formation, their bodies made of living crystal, their limbs ending in edges sharp enough to cut steel. A Torvun cadet stomped by, each footstep shaking the ground. He stood 8 ft tall and probably weighed as much as a small vehicle. Maya adjusted her shoulder bag. Inside it she had packed practical shoes, 3 changes of clothes, her favorite tea kettle, and a data pad loaded with administrative forms. She followed the crowd toward the main building. Name and species. Scarred alien barked at her when she reached the entrance. He was Vexari, the species that founded the academy. His skin was dark purple, his eyes were solid black, and half his face was covered in burn marks. Maya Chen, human. The officer looked at his list. He looked at Maya. He looked at the list. Again, there must be some mistake. That is what I said. Maya smiled politely. But my paperwork is in order. Would you like to see it? She held out her acceptance letter and transferred documents. The officer took them, examined every seal and signature, and found nothing wrong. I am common, Drex, he said slowly. I have run orientation for 30 years. I have never seen a human enrolled here. I understand there was a clerical error. I was supposed to go to the administrative academy, then go there. I cannot. The transfer is already processed. Changing it requires Form 7B, an approval from the Vexari Admission Council. Command Drex stared at her. He had fought in 12 wars and killed over 100 enemies in personal combat. He had never been defeated by paperwork before. You will die here, he said. First year mortality rate is 23%, and that is for trained warriors. You are soft, weak. You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. Someone will challenge you to a ranking duel within your first day, and they will kill you. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Is there somewhere I can file a formal safety complaint about that? Drex had no answer. He waved her through. The dormitory assignment office was staffed by a tired-looking alien who handed Maya a room key without even glancing up. Building 7, room 304. Your roommate is already there. Orientation assembly is in 2 hours. Do not be late. Maya thanked him and went to find her room. Building 7 was the smallest dormitory, tucked in a corner of the campus where the mountain wind howled constantly. The walls were cracked. Heating system groaned. This was where the academy put students it expected to fail. Room 304 was on the 3rd floor. Maya knocked before entering. Her roommate was a silicon, a being of living crystal that shifted between blue and purple as it moved. Silicons had no faces in the human sense, just smooth surfaces that reflected light. This one was smaller than most Maya had seen, barely taller than herself. One of its arms had a visible crack running through it. I am Crix, the silicon said. Its voice came from vibrations in its crystal body. You are my new roommate. Maya Chan, human. Nice to meet you. Crix tilted its head. I have heard of humans. You are the soft species from the Death World. Death World, your planet Earth. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, dangerous predators, toxic plants. Statistically, one of the most hostile environments for organic life. Vexari scientists are fascinated that anything survives there. Maya had never thought of Earth that way. I suppose we're used to it, and yet you have no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armor. We have thumbs, Maya offered. Crix made a sound that might have been laughter. You will be challenged before sunset. The lowest ranked student always is. Whoever defeats you gains easy advancement points. What happens in a challenge? Combat. The rules vary depending on what the challenger specifies. Most choose blood duels. First to draw blood wins. Some choose submission duels where you fight until one party surrenders. A few choose death matches. Crix paused. New students rarely choose death matches. The academy discourages waste. Ma sat on her bed. It was hard as stone and probably made of stone. She opened her bag and took out her tea kettle. Would you like some tea? She asked. Crix stared at her. You are about to die and you are making tea. I find it calming. Also, I read somewhere that silicons can absorb nutrients from hot liquids. Is that true? It is. Crix was quiet for a moment. No one has ever offered me tea before. Then you should definitely try some. I brought a very nice shamil blend from Earth. They drank tea together while Mia unpacked. Crix watched her place a small photograph on her desk showing Maya with two older humans who were probably her parents. She arranged her data pad and stylus neatly beside it. She hung her 3 sets of clothes in the tiny closet. You are strange, Crix said. Finally, I have been told that before. The orientation assembly took place in a massive hall carved from the mountain itself. Thousands of new students sat on stone benches while Commandant Drex stood on a raised platform, explaining the rules of the academy. Maya listened carefully and took notes. The ranking system was simple. Every student had a number. You improved your number by defeating higher-ranked students in challenges. You dropped in rank by losing. The top students received the best training, the best equipment, and the best assignments after graduation. The bottom students received nothing but more challenges from those seeking easy victories. Combat was regulated but deadly. The academy provided medical care, but some injuries were beyond healing. Death was considered an acceptable outcome, a natural result of weakness. Maya was ranked last, number 2,847 out of 2,847 first-year students. Her combat assessment score was 0. Her threat level was listed as negligible. After orientation, she had exactly 43 minutes of peace. Torvund Cadet found her in the dining hall. He was young for his species, probably the equivalent of a human teenager, but he still towered over every other being in the room. His skin was thick and gray like elephant hide. His hands were the size of dinner plates. Human, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. I am Brawl of the Stone Fist Clan. I challenge you to a ranking duel. The dining hall went quiet. Everyone turned to watch. Maya set down her food. I see. What are the terms? Standard blood duel. First to draw blood wins. Brule smiled, showing teeth like broken concrete. You have 1 hour to accept or you are expelled for cowardice. I accept, Maya said. Whispers filled the room. Most students expected her to run or beg. Instead, she smiled politely and professionally, the same way she had smiled at thousands of frustrated immigrants during her years at the documentation department. Excellent, Brule said. Meet me at Training Arena 6 in 1 hour. Try not to cry too much. News of Maya's victory spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. By the next morning, everyone knew about the human who had defeated a Torvund with paperwork. Opinions were divided. Some cadets laughed. They called it a fluke, a joke, a trick that would only work once. Brule had been foolish enough to accept strange terms, but no one else would make that mistake. The next challenger would simply refuse to let Ma set the parameters. Others were curious. They had never heard of administrative combat before. They wondered what other forgotten rules were buried in those 4,000 pages that no one ever read. Small number were angry. They believed Maya had dishonored the academy by avoiding real combat. Warriors were supposed to fight with strength and skill, not with words and documents. What she had done was cowardice dressed in clever clothing. Maya did not care about any of these opinions. She had survived her first day, and that was enough for now. She spent the morning exploring the campus. The academy was enormous, built into and around the mountain like a city designed by soldiers. There were training arenas of every size, from small circles for personal duels to massive stadiums that could hold thousands. There were armories stocked with weapons from 100 different worlds. There were medical facilities equipped to heal wounds that would kill lesser beings. There were also libraries. Maya found the main library on the east side of campus, a towering building filled with physical books and digital archives. Most students came here to study combat techniques and battle histories. Maya went straight to the legal section. Can I help you? The librarian asked. He was an ancient Vexari. His purple skin faded to gray, his eyes clouded with age. I am looking for the complete academy regulations, all volumes including historical amendments and archive provisions. The librarian stared at her. No student has ever asked for that. I am asking now. He led her to a dusty corner of the library where 17 thick volumes sat on shelves that had not been touched in decades. Maya pulled out the first one and started reading. She read for 6 hours. She took notes on her data pad, marking interesting passages and cross-referencing related sections. The regulations were a maze of rules built on top of other rules, amended and modified over centuries of academy history. Most of it was boring. Some of it was contradictory. A surprising amount of it was completely forgotten. Maya found 12 different alternatives to physical combat buried in the regulations. Administrative combat was just one option. There was also logistical combat, where opponents competed to organize supplies, intelligence assessment, a written examination, resource management, simulation, a complex game involving strategic planning, endurance, competition, which measured stamina rather than fighting skill, and several others, each more obscure than the last. These alternatives existed because the academy had not always been pure warrior training. Long ago it had produced generals and admirals and strategists, beings who won wars with their minds rather than their fists. Over time, the warrior tradition had grown dominant, and these other paths had been forgotten, but the rules remained. Maya smiled and kept reading. That evening, she received her second challenge. A CF warrior named Voss found her in the dormitory common room. Cree were tall and gray, with her arms and skin like stone. They were known for their strength and their temper. Voss said, both in abundance. Human, he growled. I challenge you, and before you try your tricks, I specify physical combat only. No paperwork games. Maya looked up from her data pad. What type of physical combat? Standard blood duel. First to draw blood. I see. Mia stood up slowly. And you are certain you want to specify the parameters yourself? Voss laughed. Obviously, I am not a fool like Brule. Very well. As the challenge party, I have the right to determine the specific physical contest. Regulation 732. Subsection A. Fine. I do not care what form of combat you choose. I will crush you either way. Wonderful, I choose logistical combat. Voss's face twisted in confusion. That is not physical combat. Actually, it is. Logistical combat involves the physical movement an organization of supplies, regulation 73287, classifies it as physical competition because it requires endurance, speed, and manual labor. Maya held up her data pad. It is right here. Would you like to read it? Voss grabbed the data pad and stared at the screen. He could not read. Standard Galactic very well. Most CF learned combat before they learned letters. This is cheating. He said it is. Following the rules you set. You specified physical combat. I selected a type of physical combat. Everything is proper and legal, common. Drex was standing in the doorway. He had been watching Maya since her first victory, trying to understand what she was doing. He stepped forward. Now she is correct, he said heavily. Challenge is valid. Logistical combat will determine the winner. The competition took place in one of the Academy's supply warehouses. Maya and Voss were each given a list of 200 items to locate, retrieve, and organize according to specific categories. Speed and accuracy both counted toward the final score. That Voss was stronger. He could carry heavier loads and move faster across the warehouse floor, but he could not read the labels on the crates. He did not understand the organizational system. He wasted time searching for items in the wrong sections and arranging them in the wrong order. Maya was small and weak, but she understood systems. She identified the warehouse layout within minutes. She created an efficient path that minimized walking distance. She read labels quickly and sorted items correctly on the first try. She won by 180 points. Voss stood in the middle of the warehouse surrounded by misplaced crates, his fists clenched in rage. This is not how warriors compete. It is how I compete. Maya said thank you for the match. She walked away before he could respond. By the end of the first week, Mia had faced 4 challenges. She won each one using different regulations. Against a silicon assassin, she invoked intelligence assessment and defeated him with a written examination on tactical theory. Against a pair of twin warriors who challenged her together, she used resource management simulation and outmaneuvered them in a strategic planning game. Against a decorated second-year student, she claimed endurance competition rights and simply outlasted him in a test of patience and stamina. She never threw a punch. She never drew blood. She never even raised her voice, and her ranking climbed. She was no longer number 2,847. After 4 victories, she had risen to number 2,156. Still near the bottom, but moving upward. More importantly, other students were starting to pay attention. Crix was the first to ask for help. I have been challenged, the silicon said one evening. They were drinking tea in their room, a habit that had become comfortable for both of them. Third-year student named Drell. He wants an easy victory to improve his ranking before graduation. When is the duel? Tomorrow, he specified a submission. Duel, I am supposed to fight until I surrender or become unable to continue. Maya set down her cup. Silicons are strong. Can you not defeat him? Crix crystal body flickered with dark colors. I am not a normal silicon. I was born with flaws in my structure. My left arm is cracked. My reflexes are slow. I was sent to this academy because my family wanted to get rid of me. They expected me to die in the first month, but you survived by hiding, by avoiding attention, by being pathetic too. Challenge, Crix's voice was bitter. Drell noticed me because I have been spending time with you. He thinks I am your ally. He wants to hurt you by defeating me. Maya thought for a moment. Did he specify the type of submission? Combat? No, just submission. Then we have options. Maya picked up her data. Pad Regulation 821.1 defines submission combat as any contest where one party must yield to the other. It does not require physical violence. There are at least 6 nonviolent forms of submission competition in the archives. They stayed up late planning. The next day, when Drell arrived at the arena expecting an easy fight, Crix invoked memory competition, a game where opponents must recall and recite increasingly complex sequences of information. The first to fail 3 times loses and must submit. Silicons had perfect memory. Their crystal minds recorded everything they ever experienced. Drell was a muscular Vexari with combat skills and very little patience for mental games. Crix won in 12 rounds. Drell submitted with his fist shaking and his pride in ruins. After that, others came to Maya. A small reptilian species called the Vet had 3 students at the academy, all rank near the bottom. They had natural camouflage but weak bodies. They asked Maya to help them find alternatives to physical duels. A young Tavan named Grix was born smaller than his siblings. He was considered defective by his clan. He had been sent to the academy to die honorably, but he did not want to die at all. He asked Maya to teach him about the regulations. Even some higher-ranked students approached her quietly, curious about the rules. They had never studied. Maya started holding informal classes in the library. She called them regulatory strategy sessions. She taught cadets how to read the rule book, how to find obscure provisions, how to protect themselves using words instead of weapons. Not everyone approved. A faction of elite students watched Ma's growing influence. With anger, they were led by a Vexari, purebred named Lord Theon. His family had produced academy champions for 12 generations. He believed in the old ways, in strength and blood and honorable combat. What Maya was doing off 3 months passed at the Vexari combat academy. Maya Chen was no longer the joke everyone expected to die in the first week. She had become something else entirely, something the academy had never seen before. Her ranking had climbed to 847 out of 2,847 first-year students. She had 131 challenges without winning a single physical fight. Her methods had spread through the lower-ranked student population like a quiet revolution. The regulatory strategy sessions in the library had grown from informal meetings to organized classes. Maya now had over 100 regular students who came to learn the forgotten rules of the academy. They were mostly the weak, the small, the species who could not compete through pure strength, but they were learning to compete through other means. Crix had become Maya's unofficial assistant. The Silicon had a perfect memory and could recall any regulation instantly. Together they created study guides and practice examinations. They helped struggling students prepare for challenges they could not win through combat. The results were visible in the academy's statistics. First year mortality had dropped by 8%. This was the largest single-year decrease in academy history. Fewer students were dying because fewer students were being forced into fights they could not win. The forgotten regulations gave them alternatives. Not everyone was grateful. Lord Theon watched me as growing influence with cold fury. He had spent 3 months searching for a way to trap her, studying the regulations she loved so much, looking for something she could not escape, and he had finally found it. The Crucible Challenge. Maya learned about it when they made his formal declaration in the Grand Arena. All first-year students were required to attend. The arena was a massive stone bowl carved into the mountainside with seating for 10,000 spectators. They stood at the center wearing ceremonial armor that gleamed in the sunlight. I invoked the ancient rite of Crucible Challenge, he announced, his voice amplified by the arena's acoustic design. Once per generation, the highest-ranked student may call upon this tradition to test a chosen opponent in pure combat. No regulations apply. No alternatives exist. The challenged party must fight or be executed for cowardice. A murmur ran through the crowd. The crucible was legendary. It had not been used in 40 years since Theon's own father had invoked it to destroy a political rival. I choose Maya Chen of Earth, Thesson continued. The human who hides behind paperwork, the coward who calls herself a strategist. Let us see what she is worth when words cannot save her. Maya sat in the spectator section with 6 beside her. Her face showed no expression inside. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. There must be a way out. Crix whispered, some rule, some exception. There is not. Maya's voice was steady even though her hands were not. I already checked. The crucible predates the modern regulations. It exists outside the normal challenge system. The only way to avoid it is to leave the academy entirely, then leave. Go back to Earth, file an appeal for the clerical error. If I leave, everyone who followed me will suffer. They will make examples of them. Everything we built will be destroyed. She stood up slowly. The entire arena was watching her. I accept the Crucible Challenge, she called out, her voice clear enough to reach every corner of the stone bowl. Then smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The combat will take place in 3 days, he said. Prepare yourself. Human, prepare to bleed. The next 3 days were the longest of Ma's life. She could not escape through regulations. She had checked every possible avenue and found nothing. The crucible was absolute, designed specifically to prevent the kind of alternatives she had been using. It was pure combat, strength against strength, and she had no strength to offer, but she could not simply give up. Too many people were counting on her. Too much had been built. So she prepared in other ways. First, she trained her body not to fight, because 3 days of training could not make her a warrior, but to survive. She ran laps around the campus until her legs burned. She practiced falling without hurting herself. She learned to roll, to dodge, to keep moving even when exhausted. A Tavan instructor named Sergeant Krellel agreed to help her. He was one of the few combat teachers who respected what Maya had accomplished. With the regulations, he did not think she could win, but he could at least teach her not to die in the first 30 seconds. Then is fast and powerful, Krellel said during their training sessions. He will try to end the fight quickly. A humiliating defeat for you and an easy victory for him. Your only chance is to make him angry, force him to make mistakes, extend the fight as long as possible. What happens if they Fight goes to time limit, Krello paused. I do not know, no crucible has ever reached the time limit, they always end in death or surrender first, Maya filed that information away in her mind. Second, she researched her opponent. Crix and the other students gathered everything they could find about Lord Theon, his family history, his previous fights, his strengths and weaknesses, his personal grudges and secret shames. The Academy kept detailed records of every student. Maya accessed them through her administrative privileges. System access she had been granted months ago to help organize regulatory files. No one had thought to revoke it. She learned that Theon was the third son of his family. His older brothers had both graduated with perfect combat records. That was skilled, but he lived in their shadows. He had something to prove. She learned that he had lost one duel in his first year, a defeat that still haunted him. His opponent had used psychological tactics, taunting him until he lost his temper and made critical errors. That had won the rematch through pure aggression, but the memory of that loss remained. She learned that his family had high expectations. They were watching this crucible as a test of his worthiness. Failure was not acceptable. This was useful, not enough to win, but enough to survive a little longer. Third, she wrote every night after training. Maya sat at her desk and wrote. She composed messages to her students explaining what to do if she lost. She wrote letters to her parents on Earth, telling them she loved them and was sorry for worrying them. She wrote notes about the regulatory strategies she had developed so the knowledge would not be lost, and she wrote something else, a document she kept secret even from Crix, a final strategy that might not work but was the only hope she had left. On the third day, Maya walked into the crucible arena. The space was smaller than the grand arena, but more intimate. The fighting circle was 30 m across, surrounded by raised platforms for spectators. Torches burned along the walls. The stone floor was stained with generations of blood. The entire academy had come to watch. Commandant Drex sat in the position of honor, his scarred face unreadable. Crix was in the front row with Maya's other students, their eyes filled with fear and hope. That entered from the opposite side. He wore light armor and carried a curved blade called a vekai, a traditional Vexari weapon. The blade had killed many opponents. It would kill one more day if he had his way. Maya wore her usual clothes, practical shoes, comfortable shirt. She carried nothing but her data pad, which she sat down at the edge of the arena before stepping into the fighting circle. No regulations will save you now, Theon said. He was smiling again, confident in his victory. No tricks, no paperwork, just you and me. I understand. Any last words? A speech for your pathetic followers? Maya looked around at the watching crowd, thousands of eyes waiting to see her die. She could feel their expectations, their curiosity, their hunger for blood. This was what the academy had always been. This was what she had tried to change. Yes, she said, I have something to say. She took a breath. I came here by mistake. Everyone knows that. A clerical error sent me to the deadliest academy in the galaxy instead of a safe administrative training program. I should have died in my first week. I had no combat training, no natural weapons, no way to survive, but I did survive. Not through strength or violence, but through understanding. I read the rules that everyone else ignored, I found. Alternatives that had been forgotten, I showed that there were other ways to win. Besides beating your opponent into submission, some of you called that cowardice. You said I was weak, that I was dishonoring the academy by refusing to fight. Maybe you were right, I am not a warrior, I never claimed to be one. But I am not a coward either. A coward would have run, a coward would have left. When the crucible was called, I am still here because I believe in what we started. I believe that strength comes in many forms, and the academy should recognize all of them. Lord thinks killing me will prove me wrong. He thinks my death will restore the old ways and destroy everything I built. Maybe it will, but the ideas will not die with me. My students will remember. The rules I found will still exist. Alternatives I discovered will still be valid. You can kill me today, but you cannot kill what I taught. That knowledge belongs to everyone now. It will survive. She turned back to face. The his faded slightly. I am ready. Maya woke up in the medical bay with bandages covering most of her body. Everything hurt. Her ribs were cracked. Her left arm was broken. She had lost enough blood to require transfusions. Medical staff had worked for 6 hours to save her life. She had never been happier to feel pain. Crix was sitting beside her bed when she opened her eyes. The silicon's crystal body flickered with anxious colors. You are awake, Crix said. The doctors were not certain you would survive the night. I am very difficult to kill. Maya tried to smile, but winced instead. What happened after I passed out? Chaos. Crix leaned closer, keeping their voice low. The committee review is scheduled for tomorrow. The is furious. He claims the result should be counted as his victory because you were clearly defeated. His supporters are demanding that the time limit rule be eliminated entirely, and the other side, your students are celebrating. They say you proved that what can outlast strength. Some of the instructors are impressed that a human with no combat training survived 12 minutes against a Vixari champion. Crix paused. Common Dant Drex has visited twice. He did not say anything. He just looked at you and left. Maya processed this information. The committee review would be critical. They would argue that she had lost the fight in every meaningful way. She would need to argue that the rules clearly stated a time limit. Result defaulted to committee review. Help me sit up, she said. I need my data pad. You need rest. I will rest after tomorrow. Right now I need to prepare. The committee review took place in the Academy Council chamber. It was a formal proceeding with representatives from every major faculty, chaired by the Academy Provost, a Vixari elder named Chancellor Kova, who had served the Academy for over a century. Maya arrived in a medical transport chair. She could not walk yet, and the doctors had strongly objected to her leaving the medical bay at all, but she refused to miss this hearing. The was already there, standing tall and proud in ceremonial robes. His expression showed barely contained fury. He had spent his whole life preparing to be a champion, and now a human secretary was threatening to steal his victory through bureaucratic technicalities. This proceeding will determine the outcome of the crucible challenge between Lord Theon of House Vex and Maya Chin of Earth. Chancellor Cover announced both parties may present their arguments. The spoke first. The facts are simple. I dominated the crucible from the first moment to the last. I wounded my opponent repeatedly. she never struck me. Once she was on the ground defeated and helpless when the time limit expired. By any reasonable standard, I won the challenge. He paced before the council, his voice growing more passionate. The time limit rule is an ancient formality that was never meant to apply to genuine combat. It exists because old duels were sometimes delayed by weather or other interruptions. No one ever imagined that a fighter would deliberately stall until the clock ran out. What Maya Chen did was not victory. It was not even survival. It was running and hiding, dressed in false courage. She stood in the arena and talked while I cut her apart. That is not how warriors behave. That is not what this academy teaches. I asked the committee to recognize the obvious truth. I won the crucible. Maya Chen lost. Her clever words cannot change the blood on the arena floor. The council members murmured among themselves. Many nodded at Theon's words. Then Maya spoke. Lord Theon is correct about many things, she began. Her voice was weak but steady. He dominated the fight. He wounded me repeatedly. I could not land a single blow against him. If the measure of victory is combat skill, then he won by every possible standard. The looked satisfied. Some of his supporters smiled, but that is not the measure of victory in a crucible challenge. The room went quiet. The crucible was established 743 years ago by Academy founder Vex Coral. The original rules are preserved in the archive of traditions, which I accessed 3 days ago using my administrative privileges. I have prepared copies for each council member. She gestured to Crix, who distributed data pads to everyone present. According to Vex Coral, the crucible was designed to test a warrior's complete capabilities, not just their combat skill. The 12-minute time limit exists specifically because Coral believed that a true warrior must know how to win quickly. A fight that drags on represents failure on both sides. The original rules state, and I quote, if the crucible reaches its time limit without decisive victory, both fighters have failed to prove their worth. The matter shall pass to review by the Academy's wisest minds, who will determine which failure was greater. Lord Theon argues that I failed by not defeating him. This is true, but he also failed by not defeating me. The question is not whether he hurt me more than I hurt him. The question is whether his failure to achieve decisive victory in 12 minutes is greater or lesser than my failure to fight back. Chancellor Kova leaned forward. An interesting interpretation, but surely the fighter who dominated the combat should be considered the lesser failure, perhaps. But consider what was at stake for each of us. Lord Theon is a trained warrior. From a champion bloodline, he has years of combat experience and access to the finest weapons and training the galaxy can offer. He was supposed to win quickly and decisively. That was the expectation. I'm a clerical worker who was sent here by mistake. I have no combat training. I have no weapons. I have no natural advantages. I was supposed to die in the first 30 seconds. Maya paused, letting her words sink in. Lord Theon failed to meet his expectations. I exceeded mine by surviving 12 minutes against a superior opponent. Which failure is greater? The champion who could not finish a quick victory, or the secretary who should not have survived at all? The council members exchanged glances. This was not an argument they had expected. The stepped forward, his composure cracking. This is absurd. She is twisting logic to avoid admitting defeat. The purpose of combat is to determine who is stronger. And I am clearly stronger. The purpose of the crucible is to determine worth. Maya replied, strength is one form of worth, but it is not the only form. Vex. Coral understood this. That is why the crucible has a time limit at all. Chancellor Kova raised a hand for silence. The council will deliberate. The deliberation lasted 3 hours. Ma waited in the hallway, too exhausted to worry. She had made her case. Whatever happened next was out of her control. When the council finally called them back, Chancellor Kova's face was unreadable. The council has reached a decision, she announced. This matter has been deeply divided. Several members believe that Lord Theon's combat dominance should be recognized. Several others believe that Maya Chen's arguments have merit. In the end, we could not reach consensus. Mia's heart sank. A split decision meant Fane would probably win by default. However, there is one ruling we can make unanimously. The Crucible Challenge was designed to test worth. Both fighters demonstrated worth in different ways. Lord Theon demonstrated combat skill. Maya Chen demonstrated endurance, strategic thinking, and an unprecedented understanding of Academy traditions. Therefore, we declare the Crucible a draw. Neither fighter is granted victory. Neither fighter is granted defeat. The challenge ends without resolution. The room erupted. Fiend roared in protest. His supporters shouted accusations of corruption. Ma's students cheered until instructors silenced them, but the ruling stood. Draw. Thesson stormed out of the chamber, promising that this was not over. Mia sat in her transport chair, processing what had happened. She had not won, but she had not lost either. In the history of the Crucible, no one had ever achieved that outcome before. Common Dant Drex appeared beside her as the room emptied. You should have died, he said quietly. Many people have told me that I am not finished. Drex looked at her with something that might have been respect. You should have died, but you did not. You faced a superior opponent and found a way to survive. That is what warriors do. Perhaps you are more of a warrior than I realized. He walked away. Before Maya could respond, the medical staff took her back to the healing bay. She spent the next 2 weeks recovering from her injuries. Visitors came constantly. Students who wanted to thank her, instructors who wanted to understand her methods, journalists from Academy publications who wanted to interview the human who had survived the impossible. Maya answered their questions politely, the way she had always answered questions at the documentation department. Yes, she had studied the regulations. Yes, she believed there were alternatives to pure combat. Yes, she hoped the Academy would consider reforming some of its traditions, but privately she was troubled. The draw had protected her from defeat, but it had also protected her from the consequences of his failure. He was still the highest ranked student. He still had power and influence, and he still hated her with burning intensity. More importantly, she had proved something she had not intended to prove. She had shown that regulations could only go so far. When someone with enough power invoked a right tradition, the rules she relied on could be bypassed entirely. She had survived the Crucible, but she had not won it, and in the Academy's culture of strength and dominance, survival without Victory was not enough, that would come. For her again, she was certain of it. Next time he would find a way to eliminate her alternatives entirely. Next time there would be no time of. 3 years had passed since Maya Chen arrived at the Vixari Combat Academy by clerical error. In that time she had survived 47 challenges, outlasted a crucible, and transformed herself from a joke into a legend. She sat now in a small office on the east side of campus, reviewing graduation requirements for her final semester. The office was plain and functional, decorated only with the photograph of her parents she had brought from Earth in a small tea kettle that had traveled with her. Through everything, a knock came at her door. Enter, Maya said. Crix walked in, crystal body shimmering with nervous energy. The silicon had changed over the years. The crack in their arm had been repaired by Academy medical staff. Their reflexes had improved through constant training. They no longer considered themselves defective. The proposal results are in, Crick said. Chancellor Kova is about to announce them. Ma sat down her data pad and stood. This was the moment she had been working toward for 2 years. The proposal for a new strategic studies track, a formal program for students who excelled mental rather than physical combat. If approved, it would be the most significant reform in Academy history. They walked together to the grand arena, where all major announcements were made. Thousands of students filled the stone benches. Faculty members stood in formal positions around the speaking platform. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Maya found her usual seat. Among her students, there were over 300 of them now, beings from dozens of species who had followed her methods and proven that alternatives to violence could succeed. They had earned their ranks through regulation challenges, intelligence competitions, and strategic simulations. Not one had achieved their position through blood. Chancellor Kova stepped forward. The ancient Vexari moved slowly but with absolute authority. She had led the Academy for over a century, and her word was law. The Annual Reform Committee has reviewed all proposals submitted this year. Kova announced most have been rejected for insufficient merit. However, one proposal has generated significant discussion. Maya felt her heartbeat faster. The proposal for a strategic studies track submitted by Maya Chenever represents a fundamental departure from Academy traditions. It suggests creating a parallel graduation path for students who demonstrate excellence in tactical thinking, regulatory knowledge, and non-combat problem solving. Opponents argue that this proposal undermines the warrior spirit that has defined the Academy for 7 centuries. They claim it would weaken our graduates and damage our reputation as the galaxy's premier combat training institution. Supporters argue that the proposal represents evolution, not degradation. They point to the decreasing mortality rates among first-year students who have adopted Chen's methods. They note that modern warfare increasingly relies on strategy and intelligence rather than pure combat skill. The crowd was utterly silent. Everyone knew what was at stake. After extensive deliberation, the Reform Committee has made its decision. Chancellor Kova paused, looking directly at Maya. The proposal is approved. The arena exploded. Maya's students leaped to their feet, cheering and embracing each other. Faculty members who had supported the reform applauded with formal dignity. Those who had opposed it Sat in stony silence, Maya remained. Seated, overwhelmed by the moment, she had done it. She had changed the academy, not just for herself but for every student who would come after her. Crix grabbed her arm. You won, Maya. You won, we won, Maya corrected. This was never just about me, but the celebration was interrupted. Lord Theon stepped forward from the crowd. He had aged in the past 3 years, his face harder, his eyes colder. He had never forgiven Maya for surviving the crucible. He had spent years trying to find ways to destroy her, and every attempt had failed. This is a disgrace, he declared loud enough for the entire arena to hear. The Academy has surrendered to weakness. We have allowed a human with no combat skills to redefine what it means to be a warrior. He pointed at Maya. I challenge you one final time, not under your regulations, not under your clever rules, a true death match, fighter against fighter, until one of us stops breathing. The arena went quiet again. Maya stood. Slowly, she had expected this. The had been waiting for the right moment to strike, and he had chosen the instant of her greatest triumph. The reform has been approved, she said calmly. Your challenge does not change that, perhaps not, but it will change you. The smiled, cold and cruel. You have built an empire of words. Let us see if it survives without you. Maya looked around the arena. Thousands of eyes watched her, waiting to see what she would do. Her students who believed in her methods, the faculty members who had just approved her reform, the traditional warriors who still thought she was a fraud. If she refused the challenge, it would prove their accusations of cowardice. If she accepted, she would almost certainly die. There was still one of the deadliest fighters in the academy, and Maya had never won a physical fight in her life, but she had learned something in her 3 years at the academy. Sometimes winning was not about defeating your opponent. Sometimes it was about changing the terms of the contest entirely. I accept your challenge, Maya said. Thesson's smile widened. But I invoke my right as the challenged party to select the combat parameters. Regulation 7322. Subsection A. The smile faded. No more tricks, human. I specified death match. That overrides your alternatives. Death match specifies the victory condition, not the combat type, Maya replied. She had memorized every word of the regulations. I may still select the specific form of combat within those parameters. Chancellor Kova stepped forward. She is correct. The regulations are clear. The hands clenched into fists. What form do you choose then? More paperwork, games, another endurance test. Number. Maya took a deep breath. I choose leadership combat. Silence. What? Feason asked. Leadership combat. Regulation 732819. A contest where each fighter selects representatives to compete on their behalf. The representatives fight under standard deathmatch rules. Victory is achieved when all representatives on one side are defeated. That is not personal combat. It is combat that tests our worth as leaders, not just as individual fighters. We have both spent 3 years building influence at this academy. You have your traditional warriors. I have my strategic students. Let us see which approach produces better results. The was silent for a long moment. He understood what Maya was doing. She was turning a personal duel into a battle between philosophies. If his warriors lost to her strategists, it would prove her methods were superior. If her Strategists lost to his warriors. It would prove the opposite either way. The Academy would have a definitive answer. How many representatives? He finally asked. 10 each, selected from our supporters. The combat continues until one side has no fighters remaining. The nodded slowly. I accept. My warriors will destroy your pathetic students, and then I will destroy you. We will see. The leadership combat took place 1 week later. The entire academy attended, packing the grand arena to capacity. This was not just a duel, it was a statement about the future of the academy itself. Maya stood on one side of the arena with her 10 chosen representatives. Crix was among them. Crystal body reinforced with new armor. The small Tavan named Grix, who had grown into a formidable tactical fighter. The 3 vet students who used their camouflage abilities for ambush strategies. 5 others, each exceptional in their own way. The stood on the opposite side with his 10 warriors. They were huge, powerful, covered in weapons and combat scars. They looked like death personified. The first match began. One of Fane's warriors faced one of Ma's VTH students. The warrior was larger, stronger, faster. He should have won easily, but the VTH was prepared. She had studied her opponent for weeks, learning his patterns and weaknesses. She used her camouflage to disappear and reappear, striking from unexpected angles, never engaging directly. She exhausted him through attrition, forcing him to chase shadows until his strength failed. She won. The second match went to the side. A pure combat specialist defeated one of Mia's students in direct confrontation, but the third match went to Mia's side again. In the fourth, the pattern continued through the afternoon. Some of Mia's students won through cleverness and strategy. Some of the warriors won through overwhelming force. But gradually the balance shifted. Maya's students had prepared. They had studied their opponents. They had developed specific strategies for each match. They fought with their minds as well as their bodies. The warriors had relied on their superior strength and skill. They had not prepared for opponents who refused to fight fair, who used the environment, who turned weaknesses into advantages. By the 9th match, the score was 5-3 in Maya's favor. Crix stepped into the arena to face the second in command, massive CR named Vaughn, who had killed 16 opponents in his academy career. Crix should not have won. Silicons were not built for direct combat, but Crix had spent 3 years learning from Maya, studying not just regulations, but strategies, not just rules, but psychology. They knew how Vaughn fought. They knew his temper.